My name is Dr. Maya Indra Ganesh. I'm Associate Director at the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence at the University of Cambridge, and I study the social and political and cultural dimensions of AI. I'm going to be joined by my colleague from Cambridge remotely, so that's the hybrid part. And with me we've just heard from Mr. Dinkar Jain and Mr. Mukesh Parekh, and I'm going to let them do their own introductions in a second. I think our panel has been brought forward a little bit. We were supposed to start with a keynote from the minister, but I think he's running a little bit late, so we're just going to get into it. Could I ask you both to just introduce yourselves again? Dinkar has just been on, of course, but maybe Mr. Parekh, Mukesh, would you like to just say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Doctor. Mukesh Parekh. I also go by Michael Parekh in America. I've been there a little under 50 years, and I visited Alabama for an undergrad, and my roommate couldn't say Mukesh, so I became Michael. Main kya karu, raah mein Michael ban gaya. I'm a finance wonk, MBA. I joined Goldman Sachs in '82 and have been attracted to technology for over 30 years. I built the Goldman Sachs internet franchise back in the mid-'90s, so a lot of the technology waves in my firm at Goldman, we've been involved with most of the technology companies that we all talk about today, that Mr. Jain talked about in terms of the Mag 7. We took Microsoft public in '86, Dell in '88, and I left about 20 years ago. I've been an investor advisor to all of the usual suspects, including OpenAI, et cetera. And I've been deeply involved in AI over the last decade. Machine learning that Mr. Jain, you spoke about, that's the genesis. You know, Uber is really the biggest AI application company when you think about it in the first generation of it. And this technology wave of AI, I agree with your directionality of the importance of this to the transistor and the printing press. But I'll just say one thing, if I may.
Okay.
That everything we've been talking about is addressed to us.
Don't give all the good stuff out right
in
the beginning.
I'm
is
not.
all I meant to say.
I just wanted to provide context,
okay.
Only in the sense that it's not about me, but the AI is very unique relative to the technology cycles of the past. And it's very easy to make comparisons to the old things, but there are some big differences that I want to touch on.
Okay, great. Well, I think we've just heard from you, Dinkar. I'm hoping that my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Penn, is online. Well, I can see him on the screen here. I don't know if everyone can see him because he's not on the big screen up here, but we can see Johnny down there. You can see him. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Johnny, Dr. Penn, for joining us. It must be like 6 or 6:15 in the morning in London, where you are. Could you just say a little bit to introduce yourself so we know who we're meeting today?
Of course. Thank you, and thank you for having me here, everyone. My name is Dr. Johnny Penn. I'm a historian of artificial intelligence, and I am the director of the Masters, the first Masters of its kind, which actually I launched with Maya on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And we offer that at the University of Cambridge. Our students come from OpenAI, from DeepMind, and they come to us with deep questions about the social ramifications of AI. So I spent a lot of my time dwelling on that subject, and I'm pleased to be joining you to discuss the future of AI today.
Thanks so much, Johnny. It's really lovely and kind of slightly surreal to be in Delhi and having this conversation. But this is a very interesting conversation. And before getting into the 3 questions that I have for the panelists, I just want to sort of give some framing remarks maybe and pick up from something that Dinkar actually was just talking about, which is that, you know, you use this phrase re-ontologizing. And it's true that a lot of our everyday life is being destabilized and disrupted and challenged and changed by what AI technologies can do. And so I think that it's very normal for us to feel anxious and fearful, especially if we don't understand the technology, because I think there is a gap in terms of translating what the technology can do. There is a need to separate the hype from reality and to focus on the positive value that the technology can bring, while also being cognizant of the social and environmental impacts of AI and thinking about sort of the regulatory environments that we need. There's also something else you said about the printing press, and I'm glad that you did, because I think Johnny's someone who can sort of like speak to the histories of technology and what technologies do and how they reshape society. So I'm going to come back to that a lot. I think you teed us up really well for this conversation. So I'm going to come back to that, and just a note to Johnny, I know that you think about these trajectories and continuities a lot. But the question I really had for each of you is, well, there are three questions actually. The first is, in your areas of expertise, in your areas of everyday work, research, and practice, what do you see is coming next? And I'd like you to try and be as specific as possible and think about what matters to your sector and industry. Second, what needs to change for this to come through, for this to come to pass? And third, what exists already that we can leverage to make happen? I hope that was not too much, but please feel free to ask me for clarifications if you'd like to. Okay, who'd like to start? Maybe we can start with Dinkar. And then maybe we'll each take each of you can take the question, what comes next, and then we'll pass it on to the others.
Sure, so your questions are what's next, what exists, what should change, and what exists to help that change, right? Yeah. So I would say in general, just to pick off where I left, like you have AI systems globally that have these crazy network effects where the more data they hoover up, the better they become. So something like Google search, for example, has, 15, 20 years of search history and click history that it's captured, right? So it's very difficult for any new entrant to come and displace that network effect. At the same token, search is an absolute utility for the internet. It's not something that any country can really live without. ChatGPT has similar tendencies, but though their network effects are a bit weaker, so still they quite haven't figured that out because they just read the internet once and train their models. So can people hear me?
We can't hear
okay, you guys can't hear me.
I think it's just the...
It's audio. I think if we all have to speak directly into the mic.
I'll change the orientation. Let me know if it still is unclear. So basically, these network effects create such grips on these domains, and AI is so foundationally critical to people's lives that we really need to think about how to change this by making sure that either you have regulated monopolies where these things are managed like utilities under intense democratic supervision, or you have certain laws that don't allow for exclusive rights over these data sets, such that many different people can compete in an open market, right? So the fundamental market structure, which we have relied on as democrats and capitalists, is challenged by this technology. AI at its core is an anti-capitalist technology, because in the sense that, if you extrapolate all the academic trends, you have to get to complete control of the entire market, and you will get there eventually very quickly, artificial intelligence network effects. So that is what needs to change. We regrettably don't have a very intelligent conversation on any of this in any policy circle anywhere in the world, while citizens around the world are suffering the consequences of these monopolistic tendencies. So that would be the main thing that's on my mind that covers most of AI companies around the world.
Great, thank you. What about you, Michael?
I think you touched on it right at the beginning. This AI thing is more feared than any technology, PC, mobile, cloud, anything. All of those things, people were excited about it. They were delighted by it. The surveys and the data shows, I'm an analyst, in the West, America, Europe, 70% of the population fears AI. I got a haircut recently. I told her I'd do AI. She goes, aren't you afraid? 70% of the people in India and China positive about AI. 3 out of 8 billion. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the developed world, which is actually building the infrastructure, has to catch up and be delighted by it. So that's next. Number 2, infrastructure. You saw OpenAI announced a $500 billion target project. Microsoft is doing 80+ billion. We need more infrastructure. And Sam Altman was here in India a couple of years ago and said, India doesn't do foundation models. I think India has a huge opportunity to do foundation models. Mukesh Ambani is doing a 3-gigawatt data center. I've spent the last 3 or 4, 5 years on data centers. We need a lot more infrastructure. And it's just at the beginning of the beginning. More power for that. So that's really next. And that means more spend in this cycle in the next 3 to 5 years than we saw in 20 years of the internet. Meaning, at Goldman, we helped raise $1 trillion to build the fiber connectivity for the internet. This time, we're going to see $1 trillion in less than 5 years in terms of data centers. So huge amount of infrastructure before AI, we can all actually use AI to do all the cool things that we are hoping for.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to pass on to you, Johnny, if you can talk about what you think comes next. What do we need? What needs to change for that to happen? And what can we leverage that we already have? Thanks.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to hear from my colleagues on the panel. Thank you both for sharing. I'll echo the investment that's coming. We see around $300 billion of CapEx put in this year, plans to be spent this year by the big American tech companies. That's a significant amount of investment. And if you think about infrastructure as having a kind of multi-decade lifespan, you know, if you build a nuclear power plant, you're going to use it for a while, and the same is true of these data centers, then we already know we're kind of locked into a future in which things like agential AI are going to play a big part of our lives. Agential AI hasn't come into the conversation yet. I'll throw it out as something that is going to be transformative. If you have a premium account with OpenAI, you can use their operator function already. That tool was demoed to me here in London on Tuesday, and I've played around with it a little bit. It searches the web on your behalf. You can tell it to find a book that you want within a 3-mile radius, and it will search every website in that area and use it as a human would, you know, move through the bookshop's website, see if it has the book you want, buy that book. And the unusual thing for the future is if you scale that up to every human user having an AI agent working on their behalf. Because if you think about the internet as we've known it as, you know, a series of highways, there are going to be more robot drivers than human drivers. That's a simple way to think about it. Now, there's lots of social ramifications, economic, political ramifications of this. It's going to be a bit of a mess, I think, in the short term. I'm interested in the ecological ramifications because all of that requires a great deal of electricity and has just been mentioned in terms of the kind of infrastructural change we can expect. You know, Europe's electricity grid is expected to need about $1 trillion or $1 billion worth. Now I'm getting my numbers mixed up. A significant amount of money to kind of alter it so that it can accommodate data centers, AI data centers, at least in that context, and it's true in the States and elsewhere as well. So what should happen, as has been mentioned, I think maintaining democratic norms is going to be difficult but critical in this next stage. And in part, I think, you know, if we were to approach this just economically, I think the kind of democratic strategy is going to be strongest because it will allow for the most experimentation, or at least kind of sustainable, healthy, societally healthy types of experimentation, because it's not clear to Sam Altman, to Elon Musk, or any of the other kind of big players in AI exactly how they're going to make their money back. It's going to come down to creative young people seeing creative uses, and I think, as we've seen in the States, that will happen in democratic contexts if supported and kind of fostered properly. So I'll stop there for now, but it's a very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm curious about, you know, a couple of things that came up in terms of the big picture issues around democracy and geopolitics. I think that's the kind of regulatory environment or the kind of trade environment that sort of emerges from that is going to be important. I think that's going to play into the environmental and the energy requirements, because as we've been hearing, this is like not something that one country can do on its own. We need to kind of be able to share resources on it. And the third thing that's of interest to me is, you know, this question of work and jobs, this is actually part of the fear. The reason why a lot of everyday people and companies and organizations sort of have anxieties is because you think about jobs. I think in the West, definitely, because there is stagnation, there is a challenge around work, there are concerns about jobs, but I want to sort of emphasize that it is actually only skills that I think we must focus on, not entire jobs. I mean, some jobs will definitely have significant change, but how do we protect workers even as we think about changes in work? You know, so I want to make the difference between work and workers. And I want to ask you three to sort of, in the time that we have, what do you think within your sectors and industries you would do to protect the interests and concerns of humans, not markets, not big, you know, not data centers, not kind of important concepts like democracy and politics, but in terms of actually humans, because yesterday I was on a panel in Gurgaon about what does it mean to be human in the age of AI, and so that's really my question. My next question to you is like, what do we do about us humans? We kind of like each other, and we want to hold on to each other, I think. So yeah, please.
I don't think we need to be afraid of AI. It is, humans are going to be just fine. We are going to be augmented with this stuff. We're going to use this and run with it. And we are going to be 10, 20, 30% more productivity out there. Goldman Sachs, my former firm, has a projection of 7% increase in global GDP from 120 billion over 10 years. I think they're low. Satya Nadella just said, he was asked, how does he justify his 80 billion? He says, 10% economic growth for the world economy. I think that's what humans are going to find. We are not going to replace things. AI is not going to replace jobs. We're going to need people for AI to do amazing things. I think the Infosys for AI is yet to be created in India. I agree with you on the data opportunity for the internet, and I agree with the opportunity to coordinate the governmental response, but I think it's going to happen bottom up in places like India, because we have 3 to 4 times the number of STEM engineering and bright minds and 35-year-olds and 20-year-olds to do this stuff. I can't be more excited about them. We will figure out how to do this. Humans are extraordinarily adaptable. Last thing I'll say, because I came to Delhi for the first time in 10 years, Uber, I'm waiting for Uber. Delhi airport is the most requested of 700 airports around the world. All my drivers, they barely speak English. They are making a wonderful living. This didn't exist 10 years ago. This same thing's going to happen in 10 years from now. We'll come back to India. India, people are going to do so many amazing things because this is there. Job loss is not the core issue, is my humble view.
Okay, thank you. Dinkar, do you want to, in the time we have
let me try and
left.
keep this in under 40 seconds so that Johnny can weigh in on this question. So there's two types of issues. One is, what does it mean to be a human? Not an economic laborer, but a human in the age of AI. I'll not address that. That's a very interesting question. The second is, what does it mean to be an employee or a worker in the age of AI? I think we have to understand a few things. Number one, technologies have always displaced labor, whether it's even the industrialization, the industrial revolution. Like, you know, machines have always moved the boundary of what humans are better at and what machines are better at. And the age-old theory of comparative advantage offers us an answer as to how that'll evolve. The second thing is, as a human race, if we can produce more, the question of who gets what rent on that is a secondary question. It may be that a bunch of people are just sitting around doing paintings and poetry while they get a check from the government, right? I mean, like, so the ability of the economy to produce more and expand the production frontier should not be held back by the fact that labor needs to be structured a certain way. The labor paradigm for 1800s is new. It came after the Industrial Revolution. The labor paradigm for 2100 could be different. So we don't need a labor paradigm to hold us back in terms of producing more and more in the economy. How we distribute the goodies from that is an independent question, in my view.
Okay, thank you. And in the 1 minute and 16 seconds that we have left for this panel, I think Dr. Penn is well teed up now to sort of close us out with sort of your response to that. But also, I would really appreciate if you could talk about this last piece about looking at technological change and disruption. Both of the previous speakers have talked about, you know, kind of earlier waves of technology. And I wonder if you could kind of respond to that, Johnny, and also maybe the printing press thing.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I think I think, and this is something I tell my students, we live in an era of extraordinary technological ambition. I think we should have the same, if not more, higher level of ambition for what our societies look like. If we do talk about the printing press, for instance, it took 400 years after the invention of the printing press for mass literacy to spread across Europe. And so it's a funny kind of historical anecdote. It's an example of not just kind of creating a tool and suddenly everybody can benefit from it. The difference that made a difference at the tail end of that 400-year period was the introduction of free mass education. It was a social reform, a social innovation that accompanied and kind of unlocked, in a sense, the technological innovation. And I think about this a lot. What are the same social innovations that will unlock the kind of technological capabilities of AI? It's a fascinating question. I think it's important when we think about the future not to foreclose on large language models, for instance, as the kind of as the sum total of AI. There are going to be new developments. There is a lot more happening outside of just that suite. So we mustn't get too distracted by the open AIs and the kind of current paradigm. There are going to be additional changes. And about the future of work and workers, you know, John von Neumann, who's the kind of one of the most well-respected mathematicians of the 20th century, right at the tail end of his life, wrote an article for Fortune magazine saying, "Can we survive technology?" And the point that he was kind of stuck on in the tail end of his career was, you know, the planet is of a finite size and we cannot grow forever. So what will we do after growth? What will the kind of post-growth look like? And I think to kind of square this with what does it mean to be a human in the age of AI, in my lifetime, in my experience, I think the people that get at the question of what it means to be human most deeply aren't the technologists, aren't the economists, aren't even the business people often. It's the artists, the poets, everybody else. And we need to, as you guys have alluded to, kind of create the conditions that they can still contribute and not have to be an Uber driver or something else, if that's the only way to make a living. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to be ambitious now and to contribute, even if you don't see yourself as an AI researcher. I know we're tight on time, so I'll stop there, but fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for that, and thank you both. I think our time is up, but I think it's been like really interesting, and thank you for your thought-provoking contributions. And I think the prompt that goes out to everybody is like, what is the social innovation that's actually going to accompany the important changes that we're going to see coming in other areas of our life? So thank you all very much, and I'm happy that we could have this chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.